Welcome back to the PreVetted Podcast, where we spotlight extraordinary people and remarkable talent reshaping our world. Today, I am joined by Michael Hess. He's founder and executive director of the Blind East Institute of Technology. Mike founded BIT in 2013 with a mission to reduce the high unemployment rate among the blind and visually impaired community, bridging the gap between talented candidates and employers across America. He brings over 20 years of experience in telecommunications and technology and has been appointed by the governor of Colorado to the Workforce Development Council and recognized with the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Business Award. Michael, welcome to the show.
Federico, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited for this conversation today.
Yes, me too. I'm excited to have you here today and honored to be able to speak with you. So for people meeting you for the first time, can you describe a little bit more what you're doing today?
Absolutely. So BIT, Blind Institute of Technology, we're all things workforce development, and it's more than, even though our name sounds blind, we're more than the blind low vision community. Federico, we're the pan disability community. We work with individuals who are deaf, hard of hearing, motor skills impaired, to include paraplegic, quadriplegic, the neurodiverse community, including ASD, ADHD, chronic illness like MS, and then even mental wellness challenges from bipolarism and anxiety disorder. So we help people with disabilities across the globe level their skills up through our academy. We have a completely virtual remote academy that's instructor-led, and we level folks up within tech. And the digital accessibility certifications and the Salesforce ecosystem certifications are what we focus individuals on. So we're very niche-y. The good news is we're very good at our niche, Federico.
Right. I mean, I think that being really good at your niche, it's a competitive advantage because that allows you to be really great at what you do. Even though there could be other markets out there, you can have a focus on what you're doing. And I think that's underrated.
Agreed. I totally agree. And it's good to have more of your bailiwick, right? Like this is what our wheelhouse is. And I think we know our niche, and we're like, I always tell the team, like, we know our swim lane. Let's be really good at our swim lane. Let's be Michael Phelps in our swim lane.
Right. So you come from deep telecom and engineering career, right? You work with Qwest, Level 3, Switch Engineering, and COBOL, right?
I did. Yeah. I started. So kind of a fun fact about me, Federico, is shortly after the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, was passed way back in July of 1990, coming up on the 36th anniversary for the ADA passing here in the United States. Probably truly the last true bipartisan legislation that's ever passed.
Wow.
Yeah. And in fine fashion, helping the disability community. But shortly after that, IBM was the first technology company to truly embrace people with disabilities as a viable talent solution. And so they sent out grant dollars to a handful of community colleges across the country. And one of them just happened to be in my backyard at the Community College of Denver. And they didn't call it workforce development back in the day, Federico, but that's what it was. It was an immersive program. It was a 13-month, 3-semester concurrent program. And at the beginning, you know nothing about being a programmer. And at the end, poof, you're a programmer. And that's what I did. And the perfect timing in 93, 94 was because the first technology bubble was being created due to Y2K. And if you could spell Y2K back in the mid 90s and you had any kind of coding skills, you were guaranteed a gig. So that was my entree into telecom and engineering, was all due to Y2K and IBM's programming program.
Right. We thought at that time, the industry thought that the war was going to end because of Y2K, right?
Right. Yeah. And I don't know about you, Federico. So on the midnight shift for Y2K, I was part of the midnight crew. I was the 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. engineering crew at my office. Even though we weren't allowed to touch any code, we weren't allowed to touch any devices, we had to be there in case, the proverbial stuff hit the fan. And so like what I remember, because of course this is way before Uber. I was at like 3 a.m. We got the all clear, like, oh, the world's not going to end, right? Even though we knew that probably at noon that day, we had to wait till 3 a.m. Well, there were no buses that were running, so I had to wait till 5 a.m. So I'm all mad because I'm like, everybody else is driving home, and I've got to, I'm dark 30, it's cold in Denver, and I've got to wait till the buses start at 5 a.m. So that's my recollection of Y2K.
Right, right. Yeah, I was waiting, expecting the world was going to end. I mean, I knew that it wasn't at that time, but I was just waiting what would happen with the clock, with the
Right.
computer clock, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Because
all the technology, microwaves, everybody was so curious about all things technology, right? So
right, right. I just wanted to see what would happen with the clock, with the BIOS clock, because it didn't have the 4 digits, right? It only had two, right?
right. Yep.
Yeah.
That's funny.
And it was everybody was so crazy about that, right? Yeah, and the banking transactions were an issue as well, right? Yeah, so many things that we didn't even consider at that time, right? And then we start considering throughout, the 99 and 2000s. I was doing back in 99. I did my first startup, so I was working on that, and then on 2001 I was working at Microsoft. I was hired during those ages, and something interesting that happened during those ages is that the we had in Argentina a convertibility crisis, right? That happened in '01. So basically, the peso and the dollar was 1-on-1. Then suddenly was like, oh, it's no more. It was basically went from 1-to-1 to free market. It went to 1, 3, 17. It was crazy. So we didn't know how much things were cost. We had, an economic fall down. It was, quite a ride.
Wow. It's great. Like looking back now and being like, okay, we survived that. And I actually think, those kind of experiences like Y2K or the experience you had with banking and free market, I think it kind of provides a little bit. I'd be curious on your thoughts on this. Little, because we lived through that, because of that lived experience, the whole like, AI craze now, and like everybody's going to be replaced by a bot or an agent. Like I'm a little less anxious, and I think it's because of, this lived history, just kind of being an old codger within technology. What are your thoughts on that?
I think we build resilience, right?
Yes.
I feel myself like, in those zombie movies where, everything is going, is a fall down, or these post-apocalyptic world. And, we kind of look at the world and we're thinking, well, it happened before, it's going to happen further down the road. So, it's okay, right? It's going to pass, right? That's how I feel about all these things, right?
I agree. And that word resilience, and actually, with kind of my blindness, right? I generally, because I'm blind and maybe my lived experience, and like this world wasn't designed for people with disabilities as a whole, and especially for the blind community. So many things are, like it's estimated that less than 10% of all websites on this planet, and there's a lot of websites, are accessible to the screen reader community. Right. And
Right.
so, but instead of like, we don't have an approach of like, oh my goodness, the sky is falling. We have we lean in, and that's why we lean so heavily into the Salesforce ecosystem, because they're quite honestly, quite literally, the most accessible business enterprise application on the planet. And so we, as an organization, we lean in heavily. And I think it is like, I leverage all of my lived experience, not only as a technologist, but also as a person with a disability.
Right. Right. And I think that's the key of the keyword resilience, right? Because uh, you have to adapt to a world that it's not designed to give you a support that you might need, right?
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. If you wait back and just wait for it to be handed to you, you're going to be waiting a long time. So yeah, you got to find the opportunities and then lean into them hard.
Yeah, I can relate to that because coming from Argentina with this economic crisis, I know it's a different situation, but it was the same thing because we didn't have a solid economy. We basically had to, we had a hostile environment that we have to adapt and survive, right? So it was different because the economy would not allow you to save money, would not allow you to buy a house, would not allow you to buy a car, right? So you have to figure things out, right? So I can relate in that matter, right?
And actually, so I love that you're actually bringing that up. And there's so much sensitivity even within the disability community, Federico, that like, oh, is it harder to be blind or is it harder to be deaf? Is it like, okay, so let's stop doing the poor me Olympics and, what you had to live through there in Argentina, again, that lived experience of free market and economic collapse, the uncertainty, like that impacted everybody in Argentina, a huge country, millions upon millions upon millions of people. It impacted everybody. So the whole poor me Olympics, like, well, but that doesn't compare to being blind. Like, actually, I don't know. Like, that's let's stop throwing that. Like, oh, that was harder than this was harder. Like, what it does is it strengthens that muscle of resilience, and I do believe resilience is a muscle that you can train.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, I had my ham amateur radio teacher. He was blind due to diabetes. So he lost his sight in his 30s, 40s. I don't know exactly, right? But he had such a great sense of humor, right? That every time somebody would say, "It's great to see you," he would, laugh at it. It's great to see you as well, right? And then we will all laugh about it, right? Because he embraced his condition and he actually was part of his personality, right? And he was a loving man, right?
So I love that, and I get to travel the world. Really blessed to be able to travel the world by myself as a blind person, and it's just my cane and my technology, and everywhere I travel, doesn't matter. Going to New York again here this week, and even in great big scary cities like New York or Chicago, Atlanta, LA, Houston, doesn't matter. Like I Istanbul, like I find angels everywhere I go.
Right.
There are nice people, because there are times that, quite honestly, I need support, right? And sometimes I'll share, like, I was in Frankfurt, Germany, and I Ubered it, and I was given the wrong address that I put into the Uber app, which is completely accessible, which is fantastic. But I do not speak sprechen Sie Deutsch. I do not speak German. Not, just barely barely pleasantries, right? Like, and I get to the wrong location, and I'm, bebopping around with my technology and my cane, and come to find out, like, oh, wrong address. And then German speaking Germans who barely spoke any English, we figured out through, Google Translate, like, okay, here's what I'm saying. Like, we use technology to get through this. And I found, like, they're like, oh, and they helped me find the correct address. They waved down a taxi for me. They got me to like, it was just, it was beautiful. Like, it was like, there's more of humanity that's there to kind of help us out with our situations, regardless of what the situations is, whether it's, language challenges, whether it's, cultural or disability. Like, I feel like there's more good people on this planet than there are not. It's just the not people end up getting too much of the media time.
Right. They're a small percentage, but they cause so much noise that they get
Way
all the
more.
attention.
Yeah. Too much noise, right, Federico? Way too
Yes.
much. Yeah.
What you're describing reminds me of my adventures driving motorcycle, because basically you are exposed, right, to an accident, to the weather, to everything, right? And it's so beautiful. When I first arrived to Mexico, I bought a motorcycle and I drove all around, even dangerous places where I shouldn't go, right? Where Michoacan, Sinaloa, places that are dangerous, or these people say you shouldn't go there because it's dangerous. And I had an amazing time. And every time that you're lost, that I was lost, or I was, run out of fuel or had a flat, when you are on those positions of exposure, right, that you're yourself out there, it's when you find the most amazing people, and they give you such an amazing treatment. There is a lot of positive sentiment when you see somebody that needs help and you help them, right? And I was invited to houses. I got help. I got so much support, and that's something that if you don't get out there, you never experience it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think that's, I just find angels everywhere I go. It's a beautiful thing for me. As a blind person, I'm not like, you can't help me because you're X, right? Like it's like I'm in a situation, and if somebody, a kind soul, comes up to me and they're like, do you need help? Yep, absolutely. Like and if I don't, then I'll let them know, like, hey, I'm good. I just, I think I'm here. Is that accurate? And and I've had times they're like, oh, dude, you're nowhere close. Let me, like, and it makes for, always makes for a fun story. And, many times, like, I feel like the reason why, I was born blind, quite honestly, is to kind of help, people, whether it's one person at a time, to create an ally within the disability community to help them, because they, often they'll be like, I want to help, but I don't know what to say. I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to do the wrong thing. And part of the disability experience way too often is there's supposed to be this like secret protocol, right? That only the disability organizations know. Like, here's the secret handshake. And what it does is it makes the world feel uncomfortable working with the disability community.
Right.
And versus, like, I just tell, like, hey, here's 5 words that'll save your butt no matter what. Like, how can I help you? How can I help you? Like, that's it, right? And because the onus isn't on the individual who wants to help. The onus is on me, Federico, to let them know, like, hey, here's what I'm looking for, right? Like, because there are so many kind people, but they've almost been conditioned to not want to help people with disabilities because they don't want to say or do the wrong thing. And my lot in life is to just, kind of break that down and just be like, this is really easy. How can I help you? But if that's your mantra for life, what a good mantra.
It's an amazing mantra. Yes, completely agree. Yeah, and the guiding, when I had to guide my teacher, there's a specific way to guide him that I didn't know. I had to learn how to do that, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I know. Yep. And so sometimes you forget to say, like, oh, there's a sign, there's a pole, there's a wall, there's a door, there's, all those kind of things. And that's okay. You have no idea. Even my wife, we've been married 31 years now. Like, she still forgets. And the good news is I've got a really hard head, so and it's okay, right? Like, just if mistakes happen and all we do is get angry over those mistakes, like, we're going to be angry a lot, and
Right.
that's kind of a lesson for life too. Like, we can always find reasons to be angry. It's actually harder work to try to, like, just move on and find forgiveness and grace, and then figure out, like, the better things in life. And I think you're going to live a longer, happier life that way too.
Right. Right. Yeah. I every time I would take my teacher to his house, I would forget about, we'll go through train tracks and there were some holes, and I always forgot to tell him that was going to be a hole. So, he will rock back and forth with his head, and I didn't realize it took me a while to realize what was going on, right? Or if I will break, he will go, he will lean forward because I wouldn't tell him, just tense up because we're going to break, right?
Yeah. It's but at the still, it's still quicker to be guided than, always using a cane, especially in places where there's a lot of obstacles on the, your foot obstacles. So yeah, I totally agree.
So you say that technology is the greatest equalizer for people with disabilities. Can you tell us a bit more about why do you think that is the case?
Yeah, it's honestly, Frederico, like, as I was explaining, like, I literally travel the world, by myself, between, my cane and technology. And so, like, with my eye device, so we'll start with, Steve Jobs. And Steve, again, first technology hardware company to fully embrace people with disabilities, first ever. And when they launched their first iDevice, they made sure that it was accessible to screen reader users like myself. So a touch screen technology. So then you start thinking of, and then back in the day when, I was a technologist and I was working as an engineer, telecom, as we talked about, you had to have, those RSA tokens, those security tokens, right? And,
Right.
Every 60 seconds, right? So if you wanted to VPN into, and work on a node, right? If you had to push a config or pull some data or, even, grant somebody access, I mean, whatever it was, right? You had to use a token like this. Well, that token was on my mobile device. And because it was on my mobile device, I could, instead of like seeing the token, I could hear it. Right. And so that
Right.
just from my career perspective, like the iPhone has been playing an incredible part of my career forever. Now, fast forward to, call it, was it 2017, 2018 when Uber was national? So it was maybe it was in 26, it was 2016, 2017. That's right. And all of a sudden now, because of my iPhone and the fact that Uber made sure that they had some bumps of making sure that their technology was completely accessible, but I could do this thing for the first time ever that never happened to me. I could independently request a ride and get someplace on my own without depending on mass transit, which was my entire life experience up in that till that time, or like a loved one or a friend. Like I could go someplace on my own, right? So, and now I tell folks all the time, between airplanes and Ubers, like I travel the world by myself. I mean, again, go places like Germany, like all by myself, because that's, allowing, first hardware and then applications to be made accessibly, like it creates autonomy, let alone the impact it has on somebody earning their own nickel with their career.
Right. Right. I think that the technology enables you to expand your horizon, literally.
It's horizons, my, so we do all things here inside of BIT. Again, we're our niche, our bailiwick, Federico, is Salesforce. We level folks up within the Salesforce ecosystem to all people with disabilities, get them certified so that way they can find gainful employment. And because of that, because of Salesforce's commitment to digital accessibility, and they are literally second to nobody from a workforce development perspective. Salesforce quite literally is the most accessible business enterprise application on the planet. So
Wow.
it's not even a close second. And so Salesforce is absolutely wanting to impact this amazing talent pool, which is the people with disabilities community, by just making sure that not the B2C, right? Not the consumer facing stuff that all the tech companies have been sued over, but the B2B, the workforce development. Salesforce stands alone as the most accessible business enterprise application on this spinning blue ball.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, I know that Apple, as you mentioned, Apple has been doing a lot of work on the human interface development for and supporting a lot of accessibility. But I didn't know that Salesforce was also committed to this effort as well.
Yeah, so I look at like what Apple has done. Like it really is it really is, call it the B2C impact. But the B2B impact, again, Salesforce stands alone. They are a unicorn. And we've reached out. I mean, if there's any of your listeners with any other tech stack company that says, "Oh, no, we'd love that." Like we have reached out to, you can name all the big tech stack companies and talk to them about, like, because we can do tech training for the disability community within any tech stack. But the tech stack has to be committed to making sure the B2B stuff is completely accessible. And we've reached out to pretty much anyone you can name right now, and we've not gotten any other takers other than Salesforce.
Right. Very interesting. I didn't know that. I know about WCAG compliance, and I think that's a great first step. But I understand that there's a lot more that the platforms can do to be accessible, right?
Well, and I know you got a chapter in your, has your book been released yet, Federico?
I am working on the final stages of
Fantastic.
editing.
Good.
And I appreciate your feedback on the chapter. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so WCAG is a great, so the next, I think it's 3.0, whenever that comes out, it's going to be broader to include mobile and that sort of thing. But it's, so what it does, I explain WCAG, to call it non-technical people. Like WCAG is the translation, from an accessibility perspective to the technical community. Right. Like if individuals who are just say power users of assistive technology, if they're people with disabilities, like WCAG is that translation layer to be able to talk to technical people. Because when you explain to somebody like, oh, and even technical people who don't necessarily understand accessibility, if we can all point to a single set of guidelines, now we can start talking a similar language. Right. And that to me is what WCAG is really good for, is where we're at least starting to get folks, talking about like, native assistive technology users and, developers. Now we can start speaking a similar language. That's what I look at WCAG as.
Right. So what additional implementation changes could company do beyond WCAG?
Well, so I always say like accessibility, like you said, is the greatest vehicle for people with disabilities. Like how do you get people with disabilities employed? Well, it has to start with making sure the environments are truly digitally accessible, right? There's also a mindset shift, Federico, right, around people with disabilities globally. Right. And unfortunately, because so many of the stories around people with disabilities, let's say the positive ones are just like, oh, here's a blind person who climbed a hill and did 5 push-ups, or, he rode a bike with, friends across the country, or, they swam across some shark whatever it is, right? There are all these inspirational stories, right? But you cannot inspire a company to hire somebody like me. Like a company has to know that there is value that I'm going to bring to its bottom line and its culture, period. Right. And so breaking down perceptions from a business perspective, quite honestly, is like, so the accessibility is an obstacle. I truly think a larger obstacle is perception around people with disabilities on a global scale.
Right. Right. As you said, is let's not focus on the victimization of the people with disability. Let's focus on how can we embrace them in the workforce by providing more accessible conditions so they can work. Right.
Yeah, and then like why? So I experience this a lot, Federico. Is again when people are just a little hesitant when it comes to disability, and I have friends in wheelchairs who they're like, nope, Mike, what you hear, what you kind of sense, we see on their faces. So there's an uncomfortableness, and I always call that uncomfortableness. I call it a squishy feeling. Right. You see somebody with a disability, like a physical, like you're able to physically see the disability, right? The sensory kind of stuff, whether it's somebody who's deaf, somebody who's blind, somebody who's in a wheelchair, somebody with a prosthetic limb, a limb difference, like those kind of obvious disabilities. Right. And it could be like a neurological from a CP. It could so many different kinds, but they're visible. People can visibly see like there's something amiss, and that what I believe that it comes from is Dr. Daniel Kahneman, who's a Nobel Prize winning economist. He's got a theory called loss aversion. And if you dig into that concept of loss aversion, you realize like it's all of humanity. It's not Eastern civilization. It's not Western civilization. It's all of humanity. And loss aversion, I believe, is like a trigger point to this uncomfortableness or this squishiness. Like when somebody's like, oh man, I'd like to help, but I have no idea what to say. I don't want to do the wrong things. I'm just not going to say anything at all. Well, if I experience that out in the real world, how often do you think that people with disabilities who are applying for jobs, right, experience that? I think it's a 1-to-1. And so instead of just, shaming decision makers, I think it's leaning into this as a concept. And I think the concept starts with this loss aversion.
Right. Right. And the generating the empathy of understanding what is your experience without accessibility and how much your life can improve with accessibility.
Well, and realizing like the people with disabilities globally, it's estimated that there's trillions, like, north of $10 trillion of disposable income from the 1.3 billion people on this spinning blue ball who identify with a disability. So businesses, quite literally are leaving, money on the table when it comes to possible revenue. And more importantly, like think of the talent pool that's out there that, we're letting our like, I just feel a little uncomfortable. Like, I don't know what reasonable accommodations are, like whatever, instead of leaning into this and just start being curious. And I think in technology, people are a lot more curious because of just by our nature. But it's the business leaders that we have to get a little bit more curious around the disability conversation.
Right. Right. I interviewed before Erin Anitavi, and she coaches neurodivergent executives, where she wrote a book about her lessons. It's a different type of accessibility problem, right? Where it's, as you said, it's invisible, and they require specific tools to be able to be included in the workforce, right?
They do, and yet so many, like a lot of times, people in the on the spectrum in the neurodiverse community, a lot of times they'll want like transcripts. Right. Transcripts are also really good for other team members who want to go back and look at the notes from a meeting because we have so many meetings. Right. So we look at these accommodations that help one population and think, well, like, oh my gosh, that's such a burden. No, actually, like closed captions, right? Like you cannot go to an airport or a noisy restaurant or a noisy bar anywhere on the globe now without closed captions being turned on, right? So a technology that was created for the deaf community, now that accommodation is working for more of humanity. And that's what business leaders, if they realize like these accommodations that are being built for the disability community, like all the text to voice stuff, right? Like, hey Siri, hey Google, hey Alexa, all those technologies started in the blind population. Is it just the blind populations that are benefiting from those technologies?
Well, actually, what she said is that accommodations make a better world for everybody.
Exactly. And that's what I'm talking about with the text to voice or the closed captions, right? Like it's just it is absolutely a one-to-one relationship when you solve for these more challenging use cases, whether it's the neurodiverse community, whether it's the deaf community, whether it's the like the curb cut effect. It's not just people in wheelchairs that are using curb cuts. So we know this, right? In technology, though, it's leaning into that just a little bit deeper and realizing like, okay, make sure that we're building a platform that is useful for everybody.
Right, right. Very interesting. Can you tell us a little bit more about how BIT is helping not only the community, but also helping the companies to, because you have two side markets, right? You have the people that needs jobs, but also the companies that are looking to hire, right?
Absolutely. So we wear a couple of different hats with Salesforce. So we are a workforce development partner. We're the only workforce development partner in the world that serves the pan disability community. We're super proud to wear that hat. And our academy is completely virtual remote, instructor-led. 100% of our instructors identify with disabilities, and we serve the broader disability community across the globe. And then the other hat we wear is we are a systems integrator partner. So we implement Salesforce projects to organizations large and small all over the globe, helping them with their Salesforce integration needs. And again, it's a very crowded room. There are a lot of system integrator partners across the globe. We're the only ones that utilize 100% of our team identify with disabilities. So we have individuals who are blind, hard of hearing, deaf, hard of hearing. We have individuals that are motor skills impaired, paraplegic, quadriplegic, neurodiverse, mental wellness challenges. We are a very welcoming team, but there's some amazing talent that's out there that we utilize to help implement projects. And then what ends up happening way too often is that these organizations they love our talent, and we're different because we actually encourage organizations to then hire our talent. Where a lot of, systems integration partners, they don't want you to poach their talent. We encourage
Right.
it. So we use these projects where we get to show off like our technical skills, and then organizations are like, man, so that's what we're doing to kind of break down the perceptions.
Right. Right. I think what you're doing, it's an amazing mission, and not only impacting the people with disability, but also helping companies find amazing talent and being able to bridge that gap. It helps both sides, and I'm happy to hear about what you're doing.
Well, thank you, Federico. And we really appreciate it. We know how thoroughly that you review and vet out your podcast guests, and we really appreciate the fact that you looked us up, you vetted us out, and you reached out to us. We want to make what we're doing mainstream, and especially mainstream to technical audiences. And so we really appreciate the invitation.
I'm super happy to have you here today. So we're running out of time. I want to ask you one last question before we wrap it up. What advice would you give to a hiring manager so they can support more, they can be more accessible and support people with disabilities?
The two things, again, it was very much prominent in our conversation today. One is accessibility is not difficult, it's intentional. And I promise you, between WCAG and just getting curious, it is not difficult to make digital platforms accessible to everybody. And at the end of the day, like if you think about it, we technologists love that their technology is going to be used by more people, not less. Right. And when a technology leader just realizes like, okay, so this isn't difficult, it's intentional. Now get curious. How do I learn this? Reach out to us. We can help you with that. I promise you it's not difficult, and it's not expensive. It's not. So the other thing too is then it's the mindset shift. Is just realizing like, okay, like I understand I have all of these memories of people with disabilities that are, maybe not the most flattering, but that can't be encompassing of everybody with a disability. And to realize like there are so many of us that are going to add so much value to your organization, and from a team member perspective, from a usability perspective, right? Adding value to your culture. And when you think about like, more than 1 billion people on this spinning blue ball that identify with a disability, we're part of your community. We're part of your families. And it makes sense that we should be part of your organizations as well. So that's, to me, it really is simple. It's not easy, but it is simple. It's realizing accessibility is not difficult, and mindset shifts can absolutely happen, and you're just going to reap the benefits on both sides of the equation.
Right. Right. And I believe in this idea of, rather than lowering the bar, keeping the bar, but making it more accessible for all folks.
So we don't want you to lower the bar for us. Like
Right.
we think that we're actually like we talked about ourselves as being best in class. Like we will outshine the average systems integrator out there. Like we know that. We get told that all the time. Like you don't. There's no downgrade in us. Like we're pretty braggadocious about like we're gonna kick ass and take names. That's who we are. We want to change your mind by showing you.
Right. And I think that hunger to prove themselves is a differentiation from any other group force.
Oh, I agree. So I think, call it, communities. We can use a lot of different words with this, but we'll say like individuals who identify as female, right? There's what they call the glass ceiling, and I don't know what they call it with the disability community. I don't know if they call it a glass ceiling. I'm not sure what the phrase is, but I want to make sure that I realize like this phrase is absolutely used for, women in the workplace. So there's something similar to people with disabilities. There just is. And we know that we have to work twice as hard for half as much. We know that, but we're going to bring that chip on our shoulder, and you're going to get an amazing team member because they're going to want to work their ass off to show you just how good we are.
I feel I identified being a Latino working with American companies, managing people in Mexico.
Yep.
And we have the same issue. We have to work twice as hard to prove ourselves. And that hunger, it's what becomes our competitive advantage if we own it, right?
If we own it.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I teach to the people that I work with, that I manage. I teach them how the cultural differences on how to work with American managers. They have different expectations, so we have to adapt. But also when we build that trust, we exceed expectations because we come with grit, we come with hunger to prove ourselves. And I mean, even though it's a different situation, I believe that there's some similarities. So I think that's
I totally agree,
important.
and I'm glad you brought that up because again, it's your lived experience, and I appreciate that. And I often say like there's more commonality that we have as humanity than we do differences. Again, it's mainstream media wherever you are that's just trying to show us that we're all different, and we're not.
Right.
We have so much more in common. I so appreciate you, Federico, for what you stand for, what you're doing. Thank you so much for the invitation to your podcast.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for being here.